Hello, this is Dr. Bob Gray Sr. Welcome to Ministry Moments. Lord willing, every Friday at 3 o'clock Central Time, we'll come to you with this broadcast, and I hope that you'll subscribe. Please do that. Go to Ministry Moments YouTube and find Bob Gray Sr. and then subscribe. That way you'll get this just automatically, just like that every week. And glad that you're joining us. There was a lawyer, a doctor, and a preacher, and they all went deer hunting. And they saw a big old buck jump up, and they all shot at the same time. The buck did just like that. And so the lawyer said, well, I'm the best shot. I think I killed it. And the doctor said, well, let me do an autopsy and I'll let you know. So he did an autopsy and came back. He said, well, fellas, the preacher killed it. I said, how do you know? Because it went in one ear and out the other. Now, I'm hoping that doesn't happen today. It goes in one ear and out the other. Because I'm going to talk to you today in our ministry moments about biblical dress, modest apparel, modesty is really an issue. We are living in a day when we've capitulated to the world, and the world has moved so far left. It's not even funny. You ought to travel with me each week as I get on an airplane travel and go to these airports. These women are taking this half off sale seriously. But I think it's very important. Last time my wife traveled with me, when she was able to, she said, I'm embarrassed to be a part of the human race, the way that people do not care for their dress and appearance in public. And she's right. But I want to talk to you about biblical dress. People think that Brother Hiles and myself and others just harped on this all the time. It is not true. Brother Hiles may say something by the way statement, maybe once a year, maybe once every 2 years. And I was the same way. I, of course, felt like that leadership should have a certain standard about them. If they're going to lead God's people, then they ought to have standards of leadership. Anybody come here and preach and teach, anybody can. And I'm not going to demand that you dress a certain way or whatever. I mean, I've talked about cigarette butts being out in the parking lot. I think there ought to be cigarette butts out in the parking lot. I just don't think it ought to be the same people smoking it every week. I don't think it ought to be the deacons or the church members, but you ought to be winning converts, and they don't know any better. They come to church, and I remember driving out after one Sunday morning, there's about 4 of those men out in the corner just a puffing away, boy. And I pulled up, rolled that window down. And I said, boys, quit that. You got to stop that. They're going to fire me. They catch you smoking out here. Now I'll have to move in with you guys. But I do think that we're fearful. We're scared to death of this culture cancel thing that's going on in the world, and scared to death of the mob. You better be afraid of what God thinks rather than what the people think. So I want to talk to you about biblical dress, if I may. Now, let me give you a definition for modest, being modest or modesty. Here we go. Dressing or behaving so as to avoid attracting sexual attention. Modest apparel. Dressing or behaving so as to avoid attracting sexual attention. Second part of that definition. Not revealing or emphasizing the figure. Not revealing or emphasizing the figure. And I know this, I'm going to be called a misogynist. I'm going to be called everything. I really don't, it really doesn't bother me. It's kind of a real kind of flattery, really. You stand for what's right, do what's right, and you get people's attention. Well, maybe somebody will think and start living right. And church ought to be a foretaste of heaven. It shouldn't be a picture of hell. It shouldn't be a worldly concert every time you come to church with the colored lights and everything. Well, I know we've got some independent Baptists. They don't call it worship teams, but it's the same thing. Walks like a duck, quacks like a duck. She's a duck. So let me give you some thoughts here, practical thoughts about biblical dress, if I may. Number one, when in doubt, don't. When in doubt, don't. If you have to question whether it's too short or too bosom showing, or when you're in doubt, don't. You're supposed to be a picture of heaven, not hell, not the world. We come to church, it shouldn't look like the world. It ought to be different. And you know better. because before your pastor's wife started putting on skinny jeans and yoga pants, you went to church, you dressed up. You didn't dress down. You know you did. And you wore a dress, you wore modest apparel when you went to church. You knew better. Before anybody started compromising, you knew better. So number one, when in doubt, don't. Talking about biblical dress now, modest apparel. Number two, don't push to the left of center, pull to the right of center. If you're going to be off to the right, not to the left. Don't get Psalm 91:1, the leadership, Moses, under the shadow of the Almighty. The leaders were not, the Levites, the leaders were not to go to the West Standard, East Standard, North Standard, South Standard. No, 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 no. Don't get close to the edge. Don't get close to the edge. You stay under the shadow of the Almighty. And if you want God's blessing on your life, you do that. You stay under the shadow of the Almighty. We're talking about biblical dress now. When in doubt, don't. Don't push to the left of center, pull to the right of center. Number three, better safe than sorry. Better safe than sorry. When people come to church, there ought to be a sense of this is like heaven. There ought to be a sense of a foretaste of heaven. And so when you come to church, that's the time to escape the world. It's tough enough as it is Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, Friday and Saturday without going to church, and have music remind you of the world and have the lack of dress remind you of the world. Though somebody ought to have a picture of heaven and a foretaste of heaven. So I said, number one, we're talking about biblical dress now. Number one, when in doubt, don't. Number two, don't push to the left of center. Don't push the issue. Pull to the right of center. Number three, better safe than sorry. Statement number four, set standards that can be measured. Make a landmark. Let me say it again. Set standards that can be measured. If you're going to have standards for leadership, then set those standards so that they can be measured. And really, black and white, if you please. And like a landmark. Don't remove the landmark. It ought to be something visible. It ought to be something seen. It ought to be something that differentiates between you and the world and your accompaniment with the world. All right. We're talking about biblical dress. When in doubt, don't. Number two, don't push to the left of center, pull to the right of center. Number three, better safe than sorry. Number four, set standards that can be measured. Think of the word landmark, but set standards that can be measured. I'm talking about leadership now. If you're going to have leadership, I'm not talking about people that come and visit your church. I'm not talking about people that just drop in, or you lead them to Christ, you pick them up Sunday morning, bring them to church. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about those of you who are leading God's people. You ought to lead them in the area of biblical dress. If you're going to sing in the choir, if you're going to sing specials, you're going to be on that platform, you're going to be in Sunday school, you're going to be a leader, part of the leader, then you ought to have biblical dress. All right. So I said, number one, when in doubt, don't. Number two, don't push to the left of center, pull to the right of center. Number three, better safe than sorry. Number four, set standards that can be measured. Make a landmark, something visible, something you can see. And then number five, do not let your clothing distract from who you are. Do not let your clothing distract from who you are. We talk about our liberal neighbor. Boy, he dresses up for Sunday morning. He dresses like he's living in hell on Monday through Saturday. He white shirt and a tie and a Bible under his arm. He goes to church, but boy, he lives like the devil. That guy's a hypocrite. Well, if you're going to define hypocrisy that way, then those of you who are saved on the inside and show the world on the outside are also hypocritical. So if you're going to jump on that liberal neighbor of yours, then you better start looking in the mirror yourself and realize that you yourself are hypocritical. Saved on the inside, well, show it on the outside. Let your light shine. And one evangelist friend of mine said, and not your tail light. But anyway, okay, write me now. bgraysenior@me.com. Go right ahead. Get it over. Get it out of your system. All right, number one, we're talking about biblical dress. When in doubt, don't. Number two, don't push to the left of center. Pull to the right of center. If you're going to make a mistake, go to the right. Number three, better safe than sorry. You're representing, as leadership, you're representing the pastor. You're representing the Lord. I'm not talking about people who come in and attend. Anybody's welcome. Be glad to. I've led people to Christ, pick them up, put them in my van, bring them to church, and they're not dressed like I think that they ought to be, but they're not leaders. They're not in leadership. I expect those in leadership to be very careful in their dress because they represent, if I'm the pastor, they represent me. They're representing the Lord. All right. So I said, number one, when in doubt, don't. Number two, don't push to the left of center, pull to the right of center. Number three, better safe than sorry. Number four, set standards that can be measured. Think of the word landmark. Okay. Number five, do not let your clothing distract from who you are. You're born again. You belong to Christ. Well, dress like you belong to Christ. Don't dress like the world. Don't dress like the concert goers. Don't do that. Don't do that at all. And you in leadership are representing the pastor. You're representing the Lord. You're representing the Lord's work. All right. So I said, do not let your clothing distract from who you are. You're saved on the inside, then short on the outside. Being casual, Brother Howes used to preach and teach, leads to being a casualty. Being casual leads you to being a casualty. Stay as far away from the right or the left or the north or the south of the camp. Stay under the shadow of the Almighty. All right. Now, number six, dress for your husband. Dress for your husband. Before you leave the house, just ask him, is this okay? And let him be honest with you about it. If he thinks it's too short, then let him tell you it's too short. Come on, don't get mad at me. Don't get mad. 50 years ago, take a look at the picture of our camps, our camp leaders, our churches, our church staff. Come on now, you know that we were modest in those days and we've lost it. We have lost it. I wonder if there's a correlation between that and God's power being poured out upon it. I wonder if there's not a correlation between that and the great churches that were built in the past. I mean, great soul winning churches. I mean, a lot of people saved, a lot of people baptized, and great church, solid church growth. So I say, dress for your husband. Find out what he likes. My wife has, I don't know how many Leslie Faye dresses. I make sure she's got Leslie Faye dresses. She loves them. She loves them. And boy, you're talking about easy to maintain. It'll save you a lot of money, fellas. You said, well, we can't find Leslie Faye anymore. Well, you may have to go to eBay. You may have to go to a few places to find them, but find the type of a dress that's modest and something that my wife looks great in Leslie Faye dresses, and I make sure that she's taken care of. I don't know how many pair of shoes she's got, but she likes it with the purse and the shoes and the dress and all of it look alike, and I like it too. So dress for your husband. Number seven, this is the last point. Aren't you proud of me? Number seven, let modesty be a fashion statement in your world. Let me say it again. Let modesty be a fashion statement in your world. Don't worry about what the world or Vogue or what they push or what TV pushes. It's terrible what's being seen on television. My wife loves Andy Griffith and Barney Fife and so on. We can start a Barney Fife show and just the first sentence in there, and my wife knows exactly what the plot is and everything, and she'll tell you what it is, and then watch the entire show. So those were the days. We were raised, my wife and I were raised in Mayberry, Augusta, where she was raised, 800, 700, 800 people. Galesburg, Michigan, where I was raised, same thing, small town. Had to put the two schools together, consolidate in order to get a good school system. And now I'm just saying that in your world, let modesty be a fashion statement in your world. In your world, who cares what the rest of them do? You dress like a lady, you sit like a lady, you walk like a lady. And I'm talking about if you're leadership, I'm talking about leadership. Now, if you're a young convert, then when you come to church, you listen and let God speak to your heart. You hit that altar and you whatever God tells you from the preaching and so on, you take care of it. Now, but if you're going to go into the role of leadership, you see, there's Levitical separation and laity separation, two separate worlds. Levitical separation is much stricter, much higher than laity separation. That's what I was talking about, Psalm 91, under the shadow of the Almighty. God didn't want Moses out there to the edge. He didn't want the Levites out to the edge, not at all, not at all. In fact, they didn't have any property given to them. The Lord was their heritage. And that's, if you're going to be a leader. Now, look, if you just got saved and you don't get mad at me now, but I'm not talking to you. I'm letting you know, I don't think y'all come to church naked, either put some clothes on, but I'm talking about leadership. If leadership jumps 10 feet, fellowship will jump 5. But if leadership jumps 5, fellowship will jump 2.5. Now, that's just the nature of the beast. It's just the way that it is. Human nature. If we take it or leave it, we'll leave it. Jim Vineyard, the greatest bus director in the whole world. What a great man. Green Beret. What a man's man. He would say, I'm lazy. I'm the laziest thing you've ever seen. And so I get up at 4 o'clock every morning just to prove that I'm not lazy, but I'm lazy. Now, please understand, I'm talking about leadership, but there ought to be modesty. There ought to be modest apparel. A person, a lady, a female, I should say, of the streets is going to dress in such a way to be provocative and to attract attention to her body because she's selling her body. Now, don't be that way. You who are involved in leadership, you understand you represent the Lord, you represent your pastor, you represent the church. And when you come in your position of leadership, you let your statement be made on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday throughout the week. Let that statement be made. I'm living for Christ. I'm not living for the world. And so then you make your fashion statement of modesty. That's your world. Let that be your statement. You have to understand, fashions come and go, don't they? Mostly go. But my wife got a sewing machine and had to sew for our daughters because at one period of time, we couldn't find anything that was modest. Couldn't find it. So she learned to sew and taught the girls to sew. Now, I'm simply saying to you, I'm talking about biblical dress. I'm talking about modest apparel. I'm talking about modesty. And I'm letting you know, I'm talking about leadership. I'm talking about leadership. Oh, if we don't get our leadership in forgive me, but singing with flip-flops on the platform of God's house is just an appearance of being influenced by the world. It's just, it is. I know this isn't going to go over very well, but you need this every once in a while. So we're talking about biblical dress. I gave you the definition at the beginning. Dressing or behaving so as to avoid attracting sexual attention. Modesty or being modest. Not revealing or emphasizing the figure. Talk about modesty, talk about modest apparel. Then the practical points that I gave for leadership is when in doubt, don't. Number 2, don't push to the left of center, pull to the right of center. Number 3, better safe than sorry. Number 4, set standards that can be measured. Think of the word landmark, all right? Number 5, do not let your clothing distract from who you are. If you're saved on the inside, then show it on the outside. Don't be hypocritical about it. All right. The number 6, dress for your husband. Ask your husband, do you like this? And he's an honest man. He'll tell you, he doesn't want you going out. Oh, listen, I would no more think of letting my daughters lay out in the front lawn in a bikini to get a suntan to make some backslidden church member feel comfortable so I can get his tithe. I would no more do that. I wouldn't more let my wife leave the house being immodestly dressed to have somebody else to feel good about being a part of a church. Like, no, I would never do that to her. She wouldn't do it herself to begin with, but I wouldn't do it. I would not do that to her. I wouldn't do it. So please understand, she knows she's representing Christ and she's representing her husband. All right, then number 7, let modesty be a fashion statement in your world. Let modesty be a fashion statement in your world. Who cares what the popular culture says? Who cares? Who cares? They're going to try to cancel you anyway. And they'll get on the internet and they'll take clips of my sermons and clips of your sermons and try to use it against us. Several females sent me a thing and accused me of being a misogynist. And so I don't ever answer. But my first thought was, how in the world, if you're not a fundamentalist, or you wouldn't even know what the word misogynist was or what it meant. Talking about biblical dress, I know you're upset with me. I understand that, but get over it. Get over it. If you want to have the great churches like we've had in the past, if you want to have great leadership in the pulpit, in Sunday school, in the bus ministry, in every area of the choir, the platform, the singing, all of that, then you better listen carefully, because I'm explaining to you what the difference between the last generation that had great men and great churches and great Christians in those churches and great leaders in those churches. That's the difference. Let's jump 10 feet. Everybody else will jump 5.5. I understand that. But let the leaders jump 10 and take it from there. Well, God bless you. Are you still here? You mad at me now? Well, get over it. You're commanded to love me. You have no choice in the matter. All right. Every Friday, 3:00 Central Time, Ministry Moments. Don't miss it. Whatever you do, make sure you're here. Go to Ministry Moments YouTube, Bob Gray Sr., and subscribe. That way you'll get it every week. And go to solvechurchproblems.com and you'll find a myriad of helps there to you. Solvechurchproblems.com and subscribe there. God bless you. Have a great Saturday. Win a lot of people to Christ. Get them down the aisle. And make sure that you have a wonderful Sunday by leading people to Christ and lining them up for Sunday. God bless you. I'll see you next week.